What happens when a mistress scorned decides to tear down the life of the man she once loved? How far will she go when she realizes he was never going to leave his wife for her? Welcome to the world of Claire, Paul, and Sarah, a tangled web of passion, betrayal, and revenge. Claire thought she could have it all: love, power, and Paul's heart. But when the truth comes crashing down, she's left with nothing but fury. What follows is a dangerous game of seduction, deception, and ultimate destruction. As Claire seduces Paul's son and wrecks his business, she forges an unexpected alliance with the very woman she sought to replace. Can betrayal truly destroy everything? Or does it create something even more dangerous? Paul is a powerful, successful businessman in his mid-40s. As CEO of a luxury real estate firm, he enjoys the lavish lifestyle that wealth brings: expensive cars, exotic vacations, and a grand mansion. Handsome and charismatic, Paul has always been admired by many, both professionally and personally. Despite his professional success, his marriage to Sarah has grown distant over the years. He craves excitement and new thrills, leading him to seek passion outside his marriage. Paul's marriage to Sarah, a woman admired for her charity work and social grace, once had the spark of a storybook romance. However, with the passing years, Sarah's attention has shifted toward her philanthropic work, and Paul feels neglected. This emotional gap leaves him open to the seduction of Claire, his younger, alluring assistant. Sarah, in her late 30s, is the epitome of class, beauty, and kindness. Known throughout society for her charitable endeavors, Sarah comes from a wealthy background, adding to the public image of her perfect life with Paul. But behind the facade of a dream marriage, Sarah has grown more distant from Paul, focusing on her work and social commitments rather than maintaining their romantic connection. Although she senses something is wrong in her marriage, she trusts Paul and remains oblivious to his affair. Her soft demeanor hides a core of strength and intelligence. Though she has put her heart into helping others, she remains unaware of the storm brewing in her own home. Claire is Paul's assistant in her late 20s, a smart and ambitious woman who is fully aware of her charm and allure. With long dark hair, striking eyes, and a sense of confidence, Claire is used to getting what she wants, especially from men. Her initial attraction to Paul stems from admiration for his success, but their professional relationship quickly turns into a passionate affair. For Claire, the thrill of sneaking around and the power that comes from being Paul's lover excites her. She imagines a life where Paul will leave Sarah and choose her, believing that her youthful allure will be enough to win his heart. However, as time passes and Paul shows no intention of leaving his wife, Claire's feelings shift from love to fury, and a dangerous plan begins to form in her mind. Ethan is Paul and Sarah's son, a handsome young man in his early 20s who is starting to follow in his father's business footsteps. Naive yet ambitious, Ethan is loyal to his family but unaware of his father's infidelity. He admires Paul's success and is eager to live up to his father's expectations, trying to carve out his own space in the family business. Claire sees Ethan as an unwitting pawn in her plan for revenge. His innocence and desire to prove himself make him an easy target for Claire's manipulation. As Paul's affair with Claire starts to crumble, she sets her sights on Ethan, intent on using him to destroy Paul's life from the inside out. Claire's heart raced as she sat in Paul's office, the smell of his cologne lingering in the air as he paced the room. The tension between them was electric, built up over months of subtle touches and stolen glances. The world outside the office seemed to disappear as Paul turned toward her, his eyes dark and filled with desire. "Claire," he whispered, his voice low and seductive. "You know I can't resist you." She smiled coyly, standing from her chair and walking toward him slowly. Her hand brushed against his arm as she stood close, their faces mere inches apart. The warmth of his body made her pulse quicken. This was the moment she had dreamed of for so long. Paul, the man she had desired from the first day she worked for him, was finally hers. He cupped her face, his thumb grazing her lips. Without another word, Paul leaned in, capturing her mouth in a passionate kiss. The world outside disappeared as they kissed hungrily, the heat between them undeniable. Claire's hands slid down his chest, feeling the strong muscles beneath his tailored suit. She had fantasized about this for months, and now it was real. His lips traveled down her neck, leaving a trail of fire as his hands roamed over her body. They stumbled toward the desk, their lips never parting as the intensity between them grew. Claire gasped as Paul's hand slid under her blouse, his touch igniting every nerve in her body. But in the back of her mind, there was always Sarah. Beautiful, perfect Sarah, who had everything Claire wanted: the wealth, the social standing, and the man. Claire pushed the thought aside as Paul's mouth found hers again, pulling her deeper into the moment. She could deal with Sarah later. For now, this was her moment of victory. As they pulled apart breathlessly, Paul looked at her with a smile that sent a thrill through her. "This will be our little secret," he murmured, running a finger down her cheek. But even as Claire nodded, she couldn't help but wonder how long she would be satisfied with just being the other woman. For now, she was willing to play her part, but one day she would make sure she had everything: Paul, his world, and his life. The soft glow of dawn filtered through Claire's bedroom curtains as she lay in bed, her mind racing with thoughts of Paul. It had been months since their passionate affair began, and each stolen moment with him had only fueled her desire for more. But lately, Claire had sensed a shift. Paul was pulling away, spending more time with Sarah, and their secret rendezvous had become fewer and farther between. Every excuse he gave to delay their future together left a bitter taste in her mouth. She replayed his words from the previous night in her head. They had met at their usual hotel, but instead of the fire and urgency she was used to, Paul had seemed distracted, almost distant. "I can't keep doing this forever," Claire he had said, running a hand through his hair after their rushed, passionless lovemaking. "Sarah, she's been trying to reconnect. We have history, a family." Claire's heart had sunk at his words, but she tried to keep her voice steady. "But you said you weren't happy with her, Paul. You told me you wanted to be with me." Paul had sighed, his face conflicted. "It's not that simple. I can't just leave her, Claire. The divorce would be messy. The business. Everything would fall apart." Everything would fall apart. Claire had repeated those words to herself ever since. Paul had no intention of leaving his wife for her. She was nothing more than a distraction, a temporary thrill in his carefully curated life. Rage burned in her chest as she sat up in bed, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. How dare he use her, toy with her emotions, and then casually dismiss her when it became inconvenient? For Claire, this wasn't just about love anymore. It was about power. She had given herself to Paul, believed in his promises, and now he was choosing Sarah over her. No, that wasn't going to happen. If he thought he could walk away unscathed, he was wrong. Claire smiled to herself, the anger turning into something far more dangerous: determination. If she couldn't have Paul, she would destroy him piece by piece. And she knew just where to start. Later that week, Claire found herself at the Whitmore mansion for a business meeting with Paul. Sarah was out of town on one of her charitable retreats, leaving the house empty except for Paul and his son Ethan. Claire had always seen Ethan as just another spoiled rich boy, handsome but naive. But today, she saw him in a different light. He was Paul's weak spot, the one place where she could strike and leave Paul reeling. Ethan had always been polite with Claire, a bit shy even, but today she was determined to change that. As she walked into the living room where Ethan was lounging, she let her gaze linger on him just a little longer than usual. He was attractive in a boyish way, with tousled hair and the kind of casual confidence that came from a life of privilege. "Hey, Ethan," she greeted him, her voice soft and sultry. "How are you?" Ethan looked up, surprised to see her, but he smiled, a bit awkwardly. "Oh, hey, Claire, I'm good. Dad's in his office if you're looking for him." Claire waved her hand dismissively as she moved closer to the couch where Ethan sat. "Actually, I was hoping to talk to you. We never really get a chance to chat." Ethan blinked, clearly taken off guard by her sudden interest. Sure. What's up?" She sat down next to him, crossing her legs slowly, making sure her skirt slid up just enough to catch his attention. She saw his eyes flicker down for a moment before he quickly looked away, his cheeks flushing slightly. "You're going to take over the family business one day, aren't you?" she asked, leaning in slightly, her voice dripping with admiration. "You must be so proud of everything your father's built." Ethan shrugged, looking modest. "Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to live up to, but I'm trying." Claire placed a hand on his arm, feeling him tense under her touch. "You'll do great. I can tell you've got what it takes." She let her fingers linger a little longer than necessary before pulling away, watching as his nervousness shifted to something else, something more curious. For the rest of the afternoon, Claire flirted with Ethan subtly, planting seeds of attraction and admiration. She made him laugh, complimented him, and let her touches linger just a little longer each time. Ethan, young and inexperienced, was clearly intrigued by the attention of a beautiful older woman. But this was just the beginning. That night, Claire returned home, her mind buzzing with the next phase of her plan. Seducing Ethan was only the first step. Paul had built his life on his business, his reputation, and his family. If she was going to tear him down, she needed to hit him where it hurt the most. She started gathering information about the company, using her position as Paul's assistant to her advantage. Financial reports, client lists, confidential emails, everything she needed to start dismantling his empire bit by bit. Claire wasn't just going to hurt Paul, she was going to ruin him. As the weeks passed, Claire's affair with Ethan grew more intense. She would meet him in secret, just as she had with Paul, seducing him with passionate kisses and lingering touches. Ethan, too young to see through her manipulation, fell deeper into her trap. He adored her, trusted her, and Claire used that trust to her advantage. And then, finally, the moment came when Claire decided to set the final part of her plan in motion. One evening, after yet another clandestine meeting with Ethan, Claire casually mentioned their relationship to Paul. She could see the shock in his eyes as the realization hit him. His son, the boy he had groomed to take over his legacy, was now entangled in the same web of deceit that Claire had spun for him. "What are you talking about?" Paul's voice was strained, barely masking his fury. Claire smiled sweetly, her voice dripping with venom. "Ethan and I, we've gotten close. You didn't think I'd wait around forever, did you?" The look of horror on Paul's face was everything Claire had hoped for. But this was only the beginning. As Paul tried to process the betrayal, Claire leaned in, her voice soft but dangerous. "And if you don't want Sarah to know about all of this, you'll do exactly as I say." Paul stared at her, his face pale. Claire had him right where she wanted him, trapped, powerless, and on the verge of losing everything. The game had begun, and Claire was playing to win. Claire stood in front of the large window of her penthouse, gazing out at the city skyline, her thoughts a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The seeds of her revenge had been planted, and now it was time to watch them bloom. The affair with Ethan had progressed flawlessly. He was smitten, completely under her spell, and Paul was trapped in a world of silent fury, unable to confront his son without exposing his own infidelity. But this was only the beginning of Paul's downfall. Days passed, and Claire subtly fed Paul pieces of information, rumors about disgruntled clients, whispers of financial mismanagement. She had meticulously gathered every detail she needed to sabotage his business, using her access to company secrets. Slowly, she began leaking this information to Paul's competitors, undermining his credibility and ruining the trust he had painstakingly built over the years. Paul's empire began to crumble. It started with a few minor setbacks, a key client leaving, a deal falling through. But soon, the cracks widened. One morning, Paul burst into his office, his face pale, as he scanned the financial reports. The numbers didn't add up. His business was hemorrhaging money, and no matter how hard he tried to stop the bleeding, it only got worse. "What the hell is happening?" Paul growled as he stormed into Claire's office, his eyes wild with desperation. Claire looked up from her desk, feigning concern. "Paul, I've been doing everything I can. I don't know what's going wrong. It's like someone's working against you from the inside." Her words stung, but Paul didn't have time to contemplate her insinuation. His mind was too consumed by the unraveling disaster that was now his life. Claire watched him silently, her heart pounding with triumph. She could almost taste his defeat. The company's stock plummeted. Investors withdrew their support. Lawsuits began piling up as the media caught wind of the business's internal chaos. The scandal grew bigger by the day, and soon Paul was no longer the powerful mogul who commanded respect. He had become a joke, a cautionary tale of a man who flew too close to the sun, only to crash and burn. And it was all Claire's doing. While the business fell apart, Claire's relationship with Ethan grew more public. She would be seen out with him at dinners, her hand casually resting on his arm, their body language intimate. Ethan was completely enraptured by her, oblivious to the havoc she had unleashed on his father. Claire played the role of the doting lover perfectly, allowing Ethan to believe he was in control, even as she pulled the strings. But the real victory was yet to come. Claire knew that to truly ruin Paul, she had to hit him where it hurt the most: his marriage. Sarah had always been the perfect wife in Paul's eyes, loyal, elegant, and above all, faithful. She had been the centerpiece of his life, the image of respectability he had carefully maintained. And now Claire was going to shatter that image, exposing Paul for the liar and cheat he truly was. It was time to reveal the affair. One evening, Claire found herself at the Whitmore estate, this time under different circumstances. She had asked Sarah to meet her for dinner, framing it as an apology, a gesture of goodwill from a woman who had worked closely with Paul for years. Sarah, gracious as always, had accepted. As they sat in the grand dining room, the atmosphere was tense. Claire could feel the weight of her plan settling in the air around them. Sarah, with her poised demeanor and warm smile, was unaware of the bombshell Claire was about to drop. "You know, Sarah," Claire began, her voice soft but calculated, "there's something I need to tell you. It's not easy, but I think you deserve to know the truth." Sarah looked up, her brow furrowing in confusion. "The truth? About what, Claire?" Claire took a deep breath, leaning in slightly. "About Paul. About what he's been hiding from you." Sarah's eyes widened in shock, but Claire didn't stop. She explained everything: the affair, the months of deceit, the lies Paul had told to keep his double life hidden. She watched as Sarah's face changed, disbelief giving way to anger, then hurt. Claire wasn't sure which would win out, but she could see the cracks forming in Sarah's perfect composure. "You're lying," Sarah whispered, her voice shaky. "Paul would never." "I wish I were lying, Sarah. I really do," Claire said, feigning sympathy. "But you know deep down it's true, don't you? All the late nights, the business trips. He was with me. I'm not proud of it, but I thought he loved me. And now, well, I realize he's been lying to both of us." For a moment, silence filled the room. Claire could see the betrayal sink in as Sarah's hands trembled. The perfect life Sarah had believed in was crumbling before her eyes, just as Paul's business had. Claire expected Sarah to lash out, to scream at her, to throw her out. But instead, Sarah did something Claire hadn't anticipated. She thanked her. Over the next few days, Sarah's world fell apart. She confronted Paul, and the fallout was explosive. Paul tried to deny it at first, but Sarah had already seen the evidence: emails, messages, hotel bills that Claire had so kindly provided. Sarah wasn't naive. She knew what Paul was capable of, and now she had proof. Paul's life spiraled into chaos. His business was on the verge of bankruptcy, and now his marriage, the one thing he had always prided himself on, was in shambles. The once confident man who had ruled over his empire with ease was now reduced to a shell of his former self. But the final blow came when Sarah made a decision that neither Paul nor Claire had expected. One afternoon, Claire received a call from Sarah, asking to meet. Claire, curious but cautious, agreed. She arrived at the Whitmore estate, unsure of what to expect. As she walked into the living room, she found Sarah sitting calmly, a glass of wine in her hand. Sarah greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for coming." Claire nodded, taking a seat opposite her. "Sarah, I'm glad you wanted to talk. I know this has been hard." "You've done more than enough," Sarah interrupted, her voice cool but firm. "And I've been doing a lot of thinking." Claire's heart raced, wondering where this conversation was headed. Had Sarah forgiven Paul? Was she about to turn against Claire? "I've realized something," Sarah continued, swirling her wine. "Paul lied to both of us. He betrayed both of us. And I think it's time we stop letting him control our lives." Claire blinked, confused. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we should join forces," Sarah said, her eyes glinting with resolve. "Paul thinks he can walk all over us. He thinks he can destroy everything we care about. But together, we can make sure he never recovers from this." Claire stared at Sarah, her mind racing. An alliance? With Sarah? It was brilliant. Together, the two women plotted the final stages of Paul's destruction. With Claire's knowledge of his business and Sarah's connections in high society, they dismantled what little Paul had left. Sarah filed for divorce, ensuring that she would take everything: the house, the assets, the reputation. And Claire, with her charm and manipulation, made sure that Paul's downfall was known to everyone in their social circle. Paul was left with nothing, no business, no family, no respect. And as Claire and Sarah stood side by side, watching him fall, they realized that in their shared pain, they had found power. The dust had finally settled. Paul's world was in ruins. The once powerful and respected Paul Whitmore now found himself a broken man. With his business dismantled and his reputation destroyed, Paul spiraled into isolation and bitterness. He had been the master of his own downfall, brought low not only by his deceit but also by the women he had underestimated. The financial collapse of his company left him bankrupt, forcing him to sell off his assets to cover mounting legal fees and debts. His former friends and business associates distanced themselves, seeing him as a cautionary tale of pride and arrogance. He moved into a modest apartment, a far cry from the sprawling estate he once called home, haunted by the choices that had led to his downfall. Perhaps most painful of all was the loss of his family. Sarah had taken full custody of their son Ethan and filed for divorce with no intention of reconciliation. Paul had gone from being a powerful figure in society to a pariah, pitied and despised in equal measure. He was left to reflect on his betrayal and wonder if, had he made different choices, his life could have been salvaged. Sarah emerged from the devastation as a stronger, more resilient woman. The betrayal had initially left her shattered, questioning everything about her marriage and the life she had built with Paul. But once the truth had been laid bare, Sarah found strength in her newfound independence. Through the divorce settlement, Sarah took control of the Whitmore estate and the majority of Paul's remaining assets. She used her influence and connections in high society to distance herself from Paul's legacy, building a new life on her own terms. Sarah focused on philanthropy, continuing the charitable work she had always loved but now with renewed purpose. She became a respected figure in her own right, not just as Paul's wife, but as a woman who had survived a devastating betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. Her relationship with Ethan also deepened. Ethan had been hurt by the revelations about his father's affair, and it took time for him to come to terms with the reality of who Paul had been. But Sarah's unwavering support helped Ethan find his way. She ensured that he stayed grounded, offering him the emotional stability that Paul had never provided. Together, they rebuilt their family, even without Paul's presence. In a twist that Sarah herself hadn't seen coming, her alliance with Claire had turned into something more. While they would never be friends in the traditional sense, there was a mutual respect between the two women. Both had been wronged, and both had found power in reclaiming their lives. Sarah's journey from betrayed wife to empowered woman had made her realize that strength could be found in the most unlikely places, even in the hands of a former mistress. For Claire, the thrill of revenge brought a bittersweet conclusion. Watching Paul's downfall had given her a sense of victory, but with it came an unexpected emptiness. She had orchestrated the perfect destruction, but as Paul's life crumbled, so did the passionate fury that had driven her for so long. The affair with Ethan ended just as she had planned. He was young, impressionable, and ultimately a pawn in her game against Paul. But as Paul lost everything, Claire found herself reflecting on the path she had chosen. While she had enjoyed the power she held over both father and son, she knew that this life of manipulation had left her hollow. Ethan, despite his devotion, was not the answer to her loneliness. She ended things with him gently, letting him go with a mix of sadness and relief. Professionally, Claire moved on from Whitmore Industries, distancing herself from the wreckage of Paul's business. She took on new opportunities, using the skills she had honed during her time with Paul to rise in the corporate world. Yet, as successful as she became, there was always a lingering shadow of her past, a reminder of the lengths she had gone to for revenge. Her alliance with Sarah had been an unexpected twist in her life. Claire had anticipated hostility or even retribution, but instead, she had found in Sarah someone who understood her more than anyone else ever had. Both women had been victims of Paul's deceit, and in that shared pain, they had forged a bond that was complex and deeply rooted in mutual understanding. Though their lives eventually diverged, Claire and Sarah remained connected, their shared history forming a strange and enduring link between them. In the end, Claire found a sense of closure in knowing that, while her relationship with Paul had been born of passion and deception, it had led her to something far more valuable, a sense of her own power and agency. Ethan had been the collateral damage in his father's betrayal, torn between his love for Claire and the reality of his family's implosion. He had been naive, believing that his relationship with Claire was genuine love, only to learn that he had been a pawn in her larger scheme. The truth hit him hard, leaving him disillusioned and angry not just at Claire, but at his father for the lies that had destroyed their family. Ethan distanced himself from both Paul and Claire, retreating into his studies and his own world. The events had forced him to mature quickly, and though the pain of betrayal lingered, he used it to fuel his personal growth. Under Sarah's guidance, he found a new sense of purpose, eventually deciding to pursue a career far away from the corporate world his father had dominated. Ethan wanted to make a name for himself, not as Paul Whitmore's son, but as someone who had overcome the worst of his family's legacy. In time, Ethan found peace, though he would never forget the lessons he had learned about love, power, and betrayal. His relationship with his mother strengthened, and he forgave her for her part in the family's dissolution, understanding that she had been as much a victim as he had been. In the end, Paul's fall from grace left an indelible mark on everyone involved. The betrayal, the affair, and the revenge had unraveled lives and shattered illusions, but it had also given birth to new beginnings. Sarah and Claire, in their own ways, found empowerment in their survival, transforming their pain into strength. Ethan, the young man caught in the middle, emerged wiser and more independent, determined to build a life untainted by his father's legacy. Paul, the architect of his own demise, was left with nothing but his memories, a man who had once held everything in his grasp, only to lose it all through his own hubris. In the end, the story of Paul Whitmore was not just one of betrayal, but of consequences of the price paid for deceit, and the unexpected alliances that can rise from the ashes of destruction.